so we can make a start. So good morning, or is it good, strictly speaking, good afternoon, isn't it? So two new ladies, two new people with us this morning, so welcome, and I hope you enjoy your first Christmas Zoom class with me. This is week 4 of a 10-week programme, and the beauty of it is you can come along live and ask me questions as I work using the chats button, and then when I've done the sort of formal demonstration teaching bit, I will take you all off mute. And we will go to Val first because I know she needs to shoot off, and we can ask questions live. And then we'll keep the microphones and the videos on for as long as you can stay with us, and we'll make and create together and see how our ideas change and adapt, and as we see what everyone else is doing. So I can see that Sue's staying, so if you want to, let me know in the comments whether you're able to stay the whole time. It doesn't matter if you need to go off, that's the beauty of the class, if you've got other things to do. And if you haven't got your materials with you, that doesn't matter either. Stay for as long as you like and catch up with the chat afterwards. I will adjust the camera angle in a moment so you can see down on the desk as to what I'm doing. But last week, what we did lots of stamping of hearts. And I'm not going to lift up the garland because it's sitting on my table, but I will show you the overhead shot of my garland afterwards. So we made all sorts of shapes. It was hearts and lanterns and 3D pom-poms. And you've started to post photographs of your work in my Facebook group, Flowers Start World. So it's really lovely to see you doing that. So what I will do, I think probably the best thing to do is to change the camera angles straight away. And I will just take me a few moments to sort that out. And then don't forget that even if you stay or you can't stay, that I will be sending out a video recording afterwards. So that bit, I only show me talking. So I chop off the bit when we were chatting informally at the beginning, and I chop off the bit right at the end when we are, being sociable. So the bit that everyone else sees that doesn't come to class is purely this sort of teach in part of things. So don't feel concerned, don't be worried that your face is plastered all over the internet. It isn't going to be. So I'm going to come up here now and find me, and I am going to bring my camera over. A little bit of adjusting. Bear with me a moment as I sort myself out. I'm starting that video there, and then I'm going to spotlight this video so that that is what everybody is now seeing. There we go. So a little bit of a reminder, if you haven't already seen my free download, 30 Ideas for Creating a Slow Nature-Inspired Handcrafted Christmas, that is available to download. And if you haven't got that already, I can make sure you get the link for doing that. So it's got some great ideas in here, and you'll find that 10 of the ideas have been marked with a Christmas tree, and those are the 10 projects that we're working through on these series of Christmas Zoom classes. And you may well already, or you would have had if you're coming to class already, have the handout for what we're doing. And this is again another booklet that tells you what we're doing every week. And you would have seen the photographs just giving an inspiration for the way we are going. So we're going to be making a pressed leaf wreath. It's quite hard to say, I have to enunciate that very carefully. But before I show you where the inspiration came, I have got the garland from last week, and you can see I've done a bit more work on mine. And if you're watching my Facebook Live on Saturday morning, you would have seen me adding these extra little bits. I've got some little bits of Scots pine tied in, and I've added some buttons and some bows as well. So whatever we do in class, there's always, another opportunity to adapt and change and switch things around a bit. So that was what we did last week. And if you weren't here last week and you want to have a copy of that video, I am happy to send it to you, and we can talk about that later on. So I should just move those out of the way. And then the inspiration for this wreath is good old Martha Stewart. Can you see this massive wreath that she is carrying here? I really liked the autumn style there, and she's got layers and layers of leaves, but we're not going to make it the same way that Martha did. I think I have marked the page in here, the way she did it. She has bound on her bits of leaf. She's managed to keep them on their stalks, And I always think that's really tricky to do in the autumn time because the leaves are so fragile that they all pull off. So we're going to be using a trusty, I'm going to be using hot glue gun, or if you don't have one of those, that you could use PVA glue, but it just take a bit more drying time. And those of you who came to the autumn classes and autumn wreaths, you may well recognise this picture, which was the inspiration for one of the wreaths that I did. And if you'd like to catch up with that video playbook, it's now available on my website if you didn't come to class. So that's a nice little book, rather apt as we've just finished with the American elections. So there as the Great American Wreath and the Great American Martha Stewart. So we've got options for this wreath about how we're going to create the base, and I'm going to be using my Floristry wreath base. So if you've ever made a Christmas door wreath before, you were probably very familiar with this. You would have been there binding on moss around the edge and adding your greenery. Now, if you don't have one of these wreaths, don't worry, because perhaps you've got, again, I've got white on white today. I've got a white dry cleaners hanger here, wire dry cleaners hanger. And I know that Sue has been doing her homework and she's fashioned her coat hanger into a heart shape, which is quite tricky to do to get the heart evenly spaced on it. If you have nothing else, a wire coat hanger is really good. And what you need to do is stretch it out like this. And then you'll spend quite a long time manoeuvring it round to fashion it into a circle. So you can imagine this, you know, it doesn't take too long. And then you've got a ready-made hook on the top as well, depending on where you're going to hang it. So that is another option for getting yourself a circle template to start. You can also buy metal hoops, which are very fashionable at the moment. I'm not using that today because actually we're going to do a Scandi-inspired Christmas door wreath much closer to Christmas, so I will show you my hoops later on. And then perhaps you haven't got any of those items, or what do you do then? Well, my advice is to take a sheet of cardboard. So this is a cardboard from Packages. I'm sure we've all been going crazy with our online shopping. So I have saved one of the boxes I've used. You could use the back of a cereal packet. This is quite tough. The cereal packet is probably a little bit flimsy, but would work perfectly well. And you then need to create yourself a circle. So I have got 2 plates here. So it's as easy as putting your plate onto the cardboard, drawing your circle round, and then finding a small enough plate. You can, I just eye this up and go round, and then you cut out. So it is quite tricky. The cardboard, the corrugated is quite tricky to cut, but it doesn't take very long to do. And I'm not going to sit there and cut it out. I've prepared one earlier. So that would be an equally good base to use. And it would just depends on what you've got to hand, the look you want to create. And you can imagine then that we would start adding our leaves on the edge. I've decided that I'm going to use this Floristry wreath because I quite like the idea of laying bare my mechanics. And when I'm going to hang this up, I'm going to hang this up on one of my windows at home. And I've got these suction hooks. Again, sorry about that, it's bare on bare, isn't it? I think I remember this for another time. So it's a little suction hook which you put on the window and then you pull it down and it locks in place, and I'm going to hang my wreath on that. And I quite fancied having because the hook's quite transparent, I quite fancy sort of embracing that sort of see-through transparent look. And I will tell you that the influence of this come from the Country Living Christmas magazine, because in one of their photographs they had on the contents page, they've just got one of these bare wreath frames hooked over one of the, you know, there's very fashionable pin boards at the moment, peg boards, where it's a piece of wood with lots of pegs, with a round sort of dolly pegs sticking out of them. And I thought, well, if that's stylish enough for country living, I think I will work with that. Although my natural inclination as a florist is to cover up my mechanics, I thought we would bend a few rules and work with showing off your mechanics. So that is the mechanics out of the way, but I will need to hang this up. And although I'm putting it onto the hook eventually, I'm going to tie a piece of ribbon onto my frame. First of all, so I know which way is up, but also it just makes it easier if I do want to hang it up afterwards. I can loop this around my little suction hook. So I fold the ribbon in half, put the looped end under the bottom, and then feed the tails through, and that just gives me something to hang from. And I also know which way is the top. So in the event I decide to sort of put perhaps an accent area on one side of my wreath, I will still know which way I wanted to hold it up. And then in terms of what I'm going to add to the wreath, I've been out collecting leaves. So hopefully you've got some leaves too. Now it may be that you just can't get out and collect leaves. So I have given you a link in the workbook to some dried stachys leaves, and they are the very furry lamb's ears. So you could use those. You could even go through, we did a lot of work with magazines and old books last week. You could even go through and cut out leaf shapes. So it's entirely up to you how you interpret this project. So I have got beech leaves here, and variety of oak leaves, and a variety here of Virginia creeper and sweet chestnut leaves as well. And originally I was going to sort them out into small, medium and large, but I've just sorted them by type. And I need to decide how to put them onto my wreath. So those of you who have made your doilies before, imagine little bundles of greenery. You've probably put a bundle of greenery at the top, bundle of greenery off to one side, and created this sort of herringbone pattern like this going down the wreath. And I thought, well, that's just too traditional. So what I'm going to do is to break the rules and not do my little herringbone pattern. I am going to glue my leaves on. Oops, just move that across, and have them very simply placed around the edge like this. So I will sit and show you how I'm going to do that in a moment, but it may be that if you want to go around with your wreath, you could decide that you would rather have that herringbone pattern. Now the problem occurs here is because we haven't got anything backed onto, there's no substance to the wreath. You just need to make sure you've actually got something to glue on. So you need to be quite careful about putting some glue on the tram lines here and attaching your first leaf. I should do it that way around. And then you could start to herringbone them over the top. And this is where your glue gun is really handy, because the glue is almost sticks almost instantaneously. And if you're using a PVA glue, it'll just take a little bit more to do. So you can decide whether you want to do this, for us in floristry, very traditional layout of one on the middle, one to the edge, one to the side, and keep repeating that, or whether you want to have them fanning out like this around the edge, or whether you want them going round like a little train track. So I've got my point of the leaf here with the stem, and then I put my next leaf over to cover the stem. So you can decide, there's options as to how you want to interpret what you're doing. Now the reason why I was thinking about grading my leaves in terms of size was I thought perhaps I could put my big leaves on first, and then I could layer up. Perhaps I might want to put another leaf on the top and another on again to really bring out the decorative detail. And I've also, just to sort of zhuzh things up a bit, I have actually off to one side got some spray paint as well. So I'm going to just glue on a few of these leaves. I'm only going to do this one little bit around here, and then I'm going to show you how you could layer up and create a more interesting design. And if you feel brave enough, get out your spray paints as well. So I have got I'm going to get rid of that leaf because that's bigger than everything else. So I'm going to go for working with Mother Nature. Perhaps I'll start off with 5 leaves of approximately the same size, but it doesn't matter. And if you see the handout I gave you, one of these, it was a total mismatch of sizes. It was as if, it had been made by a child because it was very naively put together. So don't feel that you need to overthink it. If this is what you want, and perhaps sometimes it can be creatively freeing, just to go for it. And you can see I am carefully thinking, but you don't have to have it neat and patterned and designed. It's just about having the opportunity to be creative and to do something that is just giving you the pleasure of making, and then of course the pleasure of somebody admiring your work, and you can say, well, actually I made it myself, which is all what we want. We want a little bit of praise, don't we? So with my hot glue gun, obviously health warning, the glue gun is hot. I would suggest that you put the glue onto the frame itself in order that you're firing at exactly the right place. You're not, getting too gluey and misattaching. And just make sure that you have actually glued that onto the frame and you haven't actually glued your materials to the tablecloth or protective covering. I'm going to overlap my leaves a little bit. So again, I just think, I don't work too quickly. I just have a think before I get going about where I want my leaves to be. And the beautiful thing about the glue gun is it does glue really, really quickly. But you will need, every so often, as I say, just to lift it off the table, because there is always a bit of spillage out to the sides. So I'm keeping mine really simple. If I decide partway through I don't like it, I can just pull the leaves off and start again and flick the glue off with the back of my pair of scissors. So nothing is set in stone. It's you creatively, finding your own path. And it may well be that as you're working, you change your mind halfway through. Or the fact that when we have a look at everybody as they work, you think, actually, I would rather do that. So Joan, you're asking about the herringbone pattern. That is merely me trying to, I like to work with a rhythm and a pattern in my head. So it is, of course, I don't know whether you've got your camera on, Joan, at the moment, or whether you are just listening in. So I would start with one at the top, a straight piece, and then I take my next piece and I go to put it on, following the line of the first piece, but I just offset it. So one to the middle, and I would say inside edge, outside edge, and that is what I call a herringbone pattern, vaguely after the herringbone sewing stitch. So it's just a sort of placement of 3. So it's one straight, one off to one side, one off to the other side, one straight. And as you know, I can only count to 3. I'm a florist, I can only count to 3. And I think about my focal flowers, my transitional flowers and my filler flowers. It's just a nice rhythmic pattern. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, if you need a little guidance. But ultimately, we're here to have fun and to be creative, and you can go ahead and break the rules. So I wouldn't get too het up on it. Just feel what goes, what intuitively you feel that you want to do. So I've got these base sleeves on, so they're covering up my mechanics. I don't know whether you can see as I lift that up, you can still see the trace lines of the frame. And my leaves aren't perfect. And again, you'd need to decide whether you want to have everything perfect. So I've got a hole in this one. I've got a bit of browning off on the others. And that'll be down to you and the way that you like to work. I particularly like, because I'm going to hang this up on the window, and I like seeing these lines behind. And to me, they're reminiscent of the veining that's naturally occurring in the leaves anyway. So I quite like that look. It's almost like we're creating a dream catcher to hang in the window. And then I could go through, and I've got some smaller leaves, more delicate leaves. Now, I haven't got a great contrast in colour with these leaves. It may be that some of you have some lovely yellows and reds. So I'm going to do a dot on the back there, not over gluing, a dot on the back. And I could start to glue them on and to layer them on in a more informal way, as if they're just blown onto the front door, backwards and forwards. So the colours don't show up particularly well there. So how about getting your spray paints out and just changing up the colours? Now, the only reason I'm doing this is my husband has gone out to walk the dog. So do not tell him I've been using spray paint on my kitchen table, because he will go loopy. So it's just our little secret. So I could change things up a bit. So what I've got some white spray paint, and I'll have to shake it, it'll be a tiny bit noisy. So I'm using, this is just a craft spray paint, Painter's Touch. And, get the lid off. And well ventilated place, ladies. Oops, I seem to have run out of paint. But I'm just giving it a little bit of a snowy effect there. So you decide if you wanted to sort of do this as an extra detail, how heavily you put your spray paint on, or whether you just want a light frosting. But you can see as I hold it up, it just gives a better contrast on the leafage there. So it may be that you start off, putting all your autumn leaves down, then you have some detail at the top. So you could layer this up, and as long as everything is glued on in place and you can give it a waggle and things don't fall off, you go creatively crazy. Now the other spray paint I've got is actually an Oasis spray paint. So this has been specially formulated to colour and preserve fresh flowers. I find when I'm using up the dried materials and silks, I just use any craft paint I can get hold of. So this, the copper, that's very noisy. The copper paint won't particularly show up, but it just add a more of a gilded effect. So it's a much more subtle paint than the gold. But of course, come Christmas time, if you decide you really love your wreath, but you think it looks too autumny, you can spray the whole lot copper or silver. So they've just been gilded slightly. Can you gild something that's copper? I'm not quite sure. But again, I could layer that up. I'll just put them on the white there for contrast so you can see. They just shine up a little bit better. It's not showing up terribly well on the camera, but that would be something you could think about doing as well. And then if you want to build on more and more, it may be that, you know, to get that Christmas feel, I've got some artificial holly leaves here, and you could add those in as well and attach them on top. So you could start to make it look a bit more Christmassy with something like that. And we did use the red beads last week. So, you know, it may be that you want to glue things on like this as well. So it almost becomes a collage, a sort of free form collage of you interpreting what it is that you want to do. Now I'm going to show you one more thing before we sort of sign off on this first sort of learn section. And that is for those of you who need to disappear off for next week, we're going to be making twiggy stars. So what do you need for your twiggy stars? You need some twigs. I have got some twigs. Actually, these were driftwood picked up from the beach. So 5, for every star you need 5 lengths of your materials. And I've got twigs here. You could practice your technique, use drinking straws, kebab sticks, anything straight, doweling rods. So hopefully things that you don't feel a massive pressure to go out and look for. I'm thinking perhaps things you have got possibly at home. And if you are a flower arranger, you may have something like this in your stash. So these are actually, they're not Medellino sticks. They look very similar to Medellino sticks. These are some kind of cane, I'm not quite sure what they were, or even silver birch twigs. And think about your 5 placements might be a group of twigs, and that will give you a different look to your twiggy star. So I will send out the worksheet for next week when I send out the recording, so you'll be able to see exactly what you need. You'll also need to tie your twigs together, and I like using this bind wire by Oasis. So it comes in a tan colour and in green. It's really handy because it's a twist tie, so you can just twist it together instead of tying a knot. If you didn't have that, you could use string, but just slightly more fiddly for tying things together. And of course then, if you decide you want to decorate your star, any of the decorations that you want, so it could be some leftover leaves from today, it could be your glitzy Christmas bits, it could be nearer to Christmas, some of your natural plant materials as well. So that is next week. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of an add-on for the leaf wreath that we've been making today. And that is that you could actually make a garland to go with your leaf wreath. It's quite difficult to say leaf wreath. So I am going to line up my beech leaves there, and to give them a very trendy appearance, I'm going to spray paint the tips. So I've got a piece of card to mask off the rest of the leaf. And then because my copper I've got more spray paint on my copper, I'm just going to move around. You could spray paint the tips of your leaves. That gives a very geometric shape. You know, you've got a nice distinct line on those. So you could use those on your wreath to give it a much more modern look, you know, much more Instagram worthy, Pinterest worthy, instead of being a sort of old-fashioned craft. We're elevating our flower arranging skills to make it something a bit more trendy. This looks really great with white. In fact, I've got white leaves in front of me, so it looks as if you have physically dip them into paint, and then you could use the twine that you used for last week's garlands to tie them all up together and string them again around your Christmas tree, or whether it's going to be across a shelf or across your mantelpiece, and then decide, perhaps you want to add in little button details or little bits of greenery again. So the ideas are there for you to adapt and work with to see what suits you. So I love using Scots pine, and you only need a couple of pieces, and you can see there as I start to lay it out, that it gives you a really, really natural looking garland. So I think I can't see any questions in the chat button. So what I will do, I think probably, is that clear enough so far about what we have got to do? So when we come and make and create together, I'm going to finish off my wreath, and then we can develop and see how the ideas go. And then next week, it'll be the Christmas star. So I am going now to, if I make this go to gallery view,